As a brain doctor, I never expected these 6 habits to drastically raise my patient's stroke risk. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The clinic buzzed with the usual chatter, but my heart raced. I stared at the test results. Numbers flashed like warning signs, each one graver than the last. My hands trembled. I knew the implications. There's a darkness creeping in that slips unnoticed into so many lives. A deadened silence hung in the air as I grasped the reality. Seemingly innocent daily habits were ticking time bombs. The first habit: late-night snacking. It seemed harmless until I remembered the patient, Mr. Hughes, who came in last week, his belly swollen, arteries clogging like overcooked pasta. Just a few chips, he chuckled. But it wasn't just chips. It was deep-fried regrets. Next was that insidious tendency to skip breakfast. I recalled my sister, Sarah, who rushed out the door each morning. She thought it saved time, but one morning, deep in her work, she decrumpled overall because her brain lacked fuel. I could still hear my voice calling her, desperation rising as I dialed 911. How could a moment of choice lead to such disaster? Then there was the horror of constant stress, my own battle each day. I took a sip from my coffee, hoping it would numb the pressure of deadlines and patient demands. The third habit erupted like a volcano: too much caffeine. Too many heartbeats racing, too many lives teetering on the edge of a stroke. I could hear the whispers around me, conversations overlapping in fear, gossip mimicking judgments. The fourth habit chilled my spine: sitting too long. I could picture Mrs. Wilson, her feeble body curled up in a chair, watching yet another soap opera. Hours turned to days. "I'll start moving tomorrow," she promised. But there was no tomorrow. Only silence. The fifth habit? Unknown toxins. I could see Marie, my dear friend, scrolling on her phone without a care, her hand gripping that plastic bottle of a popular energy drink. I tasted the bitterness in my mouth. These choices matter, I wanted to scream. What could I do? Why couldn't they see they were inviting disaster? Finally, the hidden killer neglecting the doctor. A routine checkup could mean life or death. I felt the weight of every ignored appointment. I stood alone in my office, the implications diving deeper into my chest, tightening like a vice. Each habit, each patient, entwined in a cruel dance. The sound of a distant siren echoed outside. Who would it be this time? With every heartbeat, my brain echoed a plea: could I reach them before it was too late? And just as I resolved to confront my patients, my phone buzzed. A message. My breath caught. It was a photo from Sarah. She was at the hospital again. What had happened? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash the like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air as I rushed through the hospital's labyrinthine corridors, my heart pounding with each determined step. My phone was still clutched tightly in my hand, a lifeline to my sister, yet at the same time, a source of dread. The image of Sarah's pale face lingered in my mind, casting shadows over the flickering lights of hope. I arrived at the ER, where the chaos of medical personnel and frantic relatives collided. The buzzing fluorescent lights above felt harsh against my anxious skin. I approached the reception desk, breathless, and asked for her room number. The nurse, a kind woman with warm eyes, tried to offer me a reassuring smile, but I could see the worry etched on her face. "Your sister had a minor seizure," she explained gently, though her words hit me like a brick. "The doctors are running tests now. They should have more information soon." "Minor?" I echoed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I had seen the consequences of what minor could spiral into a pattern too familiar, carved into my memory. I took a seat in the waiting area, where other families were caught in their own tangled webs of worry and despair. I felt as if I were submerged in a deep ocean, unable to breathe. As I sat there, I thought about my own fight against the pitfalls I had outlined only hours earlier. How did I become so consumed by my profession that I had overlooked my own sister? The guilt collided with anguish, swirling together in a twisted web. If only I had convinced her to slow down, to take better care of herself. Where had my concern gone? Eventually, the door swung open, and a doctor strode in, her brow furrowed as she scanned the room for someone. "Are you the family of Sarah?" she asked, her voice calm but serious. My heart sank as I stood, fear gripping me. "Yes, I'm her brother." "What is going on?" She took a deep breath. "She's stable now. We ran some tests. It seems the seizure was brought on by severe dehydration and fatigue. Her body is struggling, and she needs to make serious lifestyle changes." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was edged with fear. What if she doesn't What if she doesn't take this seriously? I could hear the fractures of family struggles creeping into my voice. The doctor nodded empathetically. That's the challenge with many patients. They often view these health warnings as non-urgent. It may take a scare for them to alter their habits. But you, she paused, her gaze piercing mine, you have an influential role here. Encouragement from family can make all the difference. I grasped onto her words. Perhaps I could guide Sarah back to the light, just as I had tried for my other patients. But the thought struck me like a lightning bolt. Am I doing enough for my own life, despite my knowledge? Am I any better at navigating my own habits? The reflection loomed before me, daunting and raw. Before I could respond, the kind nurse returned, a subtle smile breaking the evidence of worry on her face. "You can see her now, if you'd like. I think she would appreciate your presence." I nodded, a swell of gratitude filling the hollow ache in my chest. I walked into the room, where Sarah lay propped up against the pillows, her eyes heavy with lethargy. She looked up, and her expression shifted from fatigue to relief at the sight of me. "I'm okay," she whispered, though her voice held an edge of doubt. There was a tear in my heart as I took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth that reminded me she was still here. "But we need to talk," I replied softly, trying to mask the urgency boiling within me. As we began to discuss her health concerns, an unexpected moment of warmth pierced through the tension. The door opened again, and in walked Mr. Hughes, his usual jovial self, even in the hospital gown. "Just wanted to see how my favorite doctor was doing," he grinned, and for a brief moment, laughter bubbled up between us. The heaviness of my thoughts lightened. Here was a small flicker of joy amidst impending darkness. "Mr. Hughes," I chuckled, "you're not supposed to make jokes while you're here." "I did. What you said, document. I'm taking my health seriously now. The doctor here has been great. Come on, we can all kick these bad habits together." His enthusiasm ignited a spark of inspiration in my heart. Could it be that hope could arise not just from despair, but from connection? However, just when my emotions began to settle, the atmosphere shifted like an approaching storm. The doctor suddenly returned, her expression unusually somber. "There is something we need to discuss further regarding Sarah's tests. Can we talk?" I looked at Sarah, whose eyes darted between us in confusion. My stomach dropped as uncertainty wrapped around me like a cold mist. What more could this moment hold? What depths of worry lay beyond our bubble of rekindled connection? I could hear the chaotic murmurings of the hospital as I faced the unsettling truth that life held no guarantees, especially for those I loved. I took a breath, bracing myself as we prepared to dive into yet another layer of reality, a reality I could no longer ignore. The air felt heavier as the doctor beckoned me into the small consultation room. I glanced back at Sarah, her face etched with unspoken fears, and nodded at her to convey that I would soon return. But deep down, a storm brewed. Visions of medical jargon and life-altering diagnoses weighed on my mind like a leaden anchor. Once we were inside, the doctor closed the door with a soft click that echoed ominously in my ears. "I want to discuss results of the additional tests we conducted. Some findings are concerning." Her gaze did not waver, and the gravity of her expression sent shivers through me. "What did you find?" My heart raced with each syllable, a sickly dread clawing up my throat. She took a moment, seemingly gathering the right words, before speaking. "The tests indicate that Sarah's seizures may not just be a result of dehydration and stress. We've detected irregularities in her thyroid function, which could indicate an underlying autoimmune issue. While it's treatable, it could complicate her situation significantly. The world outside seemed to fade away, drowning out the sharp sounds of life bustling beyond the walls. I felt my chest tighten, the walls inching closer as fear cascaded through me. What does that mean for her? Are you suggesting this is serious? I can't provide a definitive prognosis, yet further tests are necessary. But I want you to be prepared for the possibility of more setbacks. Her body is under a lot of strain. The words weighed on me like a stone. Those strains were now spilling into the shadows, threatening to engulf us both. As the doctor began to lay plans for next steps and potential treatments, my mind drifted back to Sarah. I thought of her fiery spirit, her laughter ringing out like a sweet melody. How could someone so vibrant be burdened with something so cruel? I thought of all the missed moments, the phone calls I hadn't made, the life I had chosen to prioritize over hers. When our conversation concluded, I stepped out into the hall, my heart heavy with what I had learned. Sarah waited in her room, and I took a moment to gather myself, afraid of the weight my words would carry. I had been so consumed with her well-being that I had forgotten about how to express the fragility of our lives, a lesson I had witnessed countless times with my patients but never fully absorbed for myself. As I re-entered her room, Sarah's eyes brightened. But the moment I sat down, her brow furrowed in concern. "You look worried. What did they say?" I took a breath, feeling the weight of my own uncertainty. "There are some complications, Sarah. It's about your health. But we will face this together." Her expression shifted, the realization dawning on her, cracking the veneer of her initial relief. "Together? What are you talking about? I thought you said it was just dehydration." "Things are more complicated than we thought. There are potential issues with your thyroid, and we need to figure this out." The words tumbled from my lips, and I found myself grappling with not just her reaction but my own emotions as well. She blinked, her vulnerability on full display. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I thought we could just fix this." It took me by surprise too. I struggled to find the right words, but the hurt in her gaze made simple sentiments feel inadequate. "I wanted to protect you, to shield you from more pain. But I know now that I didn't protect myself from the truth either." Her hands trembled as I grasped them, a bridge between our turmoil. "You were always the one who kept us afloat. I always depended on you." "Maybe it's time we lean on each other," I said, my own voice thick with an unformed sense of resolve. The conversation shifted subtly back to lighter tones, as we spoke about her favorite movies and future plans, distractions woven from hope. For a fleeting moment, we seemed to forget the shadows lurking just beyond our walls. I let laughter flow, forced but necessary, and I watched as some of the color returned to her cheeks, but as the hours crept forward, the specter of the doctor's news loomed in my mind like an uninvited guest. Just when I thought we had carved a path toward healing, the nurse re-entered the room, her demeanor unusually tense. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there has been a change in Sarah's tests. The doctor would like you both to come with her to discuss a potential complication." A cold wash of dread flooded over me, chilling the encouraging warmth we had just shared. As Sarah's expression changed to unease, I could feel that fragile thread of hope begin to unravel. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were now entering a treacherous part of our journey, and fear loomed over us like a heavy fog. "Let us just see what she has to say," I managed to say, though my own voice quaked with uncertainty. As we stepped into the hallway, I knew we were only at the beginning of an arduous road, but a dark thought crept in as I clutched Sarah's hand tighter. What if this struggle was more than just about her health? What if this was about learning to unearth the scars we carried, and confronting fears we had long buried? The reality was as chilling as the unknown, and I braced myself for whatever the doctor's news would reveal. The office felt cold, the fluorescent lights stark and cruel. Sarah clutched my hand as we followed the nurse. Her fingers were clammy and trembling, a physical echo of her swirling fears. Each step closer to the consultation room shrouded us in deeper layers of uncertainty. The doctor greeted us with an air of familiar professionalism, but I didn't miss the flicker of unease in her eyes. Her notebook lay open on the desk, a grim invitation to the unknown. "I appreciate your patience," she began, as if trying to gather steam for the conversation ahead. "Unfortunately, we have encountered some concerning results from Sarah's latest blood tests. It seems we may have to consider a possibility we had not discussed before. My heartbeat drummed in my ears, drowning out her words. I felt Sarah tense beside me, her breath hitching as she sought solace in our shared embrace. What does this mean? I managed to ask, my voice cracking under the weight of trepidation. There are indications of inflammation that could lead to further complications, she continued, her tone clipped yet careful, as though choosing her words was akin to navigating a minefield. There's a chance we're looking at an autoimmune disorder, which can manifest differently in each individual. We may need to consider treatments that could be more intensive than anticipated. As she spoke, a well of despair began to swell within me. Each word seemed to excavate my hidden fears, exposing my inadequacies as both a caregiver and a partner. How had I let it come to this? Sarah's face paled, the bright warmth that flared in her eyes now foggy with disbelief. There must be something we can do. I'm not ready for all of this. Let us take this one step at a time, I assured her, squeezing her hand with a gentleness that belied my growing panic. We will figure this out together. But even as I spoke, a nagging doubt brushed against my confidence. The doctor outlined a plan, more tests, potential treatments, dietary adjustments, changes that seemed overwhelming. I registered her words, but they felt abstract, floating in a haze that blurred my capacity for comprehension. Only Sarah remained tethered to reality, her eyes darting back and forth between us, seeking answers that neither of us could provide. As the meeting came to a close, an unsettling silence settled. The next steps offered no comfort, merely amplifying the uncertainty that enveloped us. I sensed that my earlier resolve to face this together felt fragile, wavering like a candle in a gale. Later, back in her room, the familiar setting felt alien. I watched as Sarah sat on her bed, picking at the thin quilt, her expression clouded with despair. What if I can't get better? She whispered, her voice a mere thread of sound. Don't say that. You will get better. You're so strong, I reassured her, but with each word, I felt the enormity of our situation pressing down. My echoes of hope felt hollow, as though I were only speaking to fill the void of fear. A tear slipped down her cheek, and my heart shattered into myriad pieces. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of our unspoken fears, pain, sorrow, and helplessness. I'm scared, she confessed, her voice tinged with vulnerability. I feel like I'm losing myself with every turn, every test, every doctor. In that moment, I saw not just Sarah, but a reflection of my own turmoil. I was scared, too. What if I was about to lose her, not just physically, but emotionally? What if our connection began to shatter under the weight of uncertainty and illness? The realization struck me: some battles were meant to be fought not just with medicine, but with heart and spirit. You're still here, Sarah. And I'm here. That's what matters, I said, my voice thickening with emotion. No tests can change the connection we have. We'll navigate through all of this, hand in hand, just like we always have. A slight smile emerged, tentative but present, and I momentarily caught a glimpse of her old self, the one who laughed unabashedly, who found joy in the smallest of moments. Yet, it sparked a new wave of guilt within me. If I only could have changed our circumstances, altered the very fabric of our reality. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, the door swung open, interrupting the swirling quiet. It was the nurse, her face tinged with urgency. I'm sorry to come in again, but there's been an unexpected development. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. What is it? She hesitated, glancing between Sarah and me, her expression hesitant yet resolute. It's about your test results, Sarah. An additional anomaly has appeared that we need to address immediately. Fear clouded my insides. What now? Would this be the moment our lives pivoted into further chaos? Would Sarah be taken from me again by forces we could neither foresee nor understand? I turned towards Sarah, the flickering ember of hope fighting against the impending darkness. But I knew then that we were standing on the brink of something uncharted, and the road ahead would be daunting. I held her gaze tightly, feeling the heavy silence closing in around us. Whatever lay ahead would challenge not only our relationship, but redefine the very essence of any hope I still clung to. The quiet hum of the hospital room wrapped around us like a heavy blanket, suffocating yet oddly comforting in its familiarity. As the nurse's words sank in, a chilling weight settled in my chest. Another anomaly? What did that mean? In a single heartbeat, the fragile accord we had found began to fray at the edges. "Sarah, I need you to focus," I said, forcing a steadiness into my voice that I didn't feel. She looked back at me, her eyes wide, and for a moment, I could see the sparks of fear igniting her soul. "Just breathe. Whatever it is, we can face it." The nurse shifted her weight, finally breaking her own tension. "We need to run further tests, CT scans, MRI, maybe even a biopsy if necessary. It's not uncommon for initial results to lead us down this path, but we just want to be thorough. It's important." Sarah let out a trembling breath, and I could see the gears of her mind turning, processing yet another layer of uncertainty stacked atop what felt like an impenetrable mountain. "What kind of anomaly?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse hesitated, her lips pursed as she weighed her next words. "It's part of the protocol, but please, just tell me." Sarah's sudden outburst grabbed everyone's attention, cutting through the suffocating air. Her vulnerability hung in the air like a raw wound, bleeding hope. "It may suggest some sort of mass development," the nurse finally said, her voice steady yet filled with an undercurrent of trepidation. "But please understand, this doesn't confirm anything specific yet. We need more information. It's just a possibility." I could feel the room collapsing in on itself. The words hung there, heavy and unyielding, casting a shadow over the flicker of hope that had dared to surface. A lump formed in my throat. I desperately wanted to provide the shield of assurance Sarah needed, but I, too, felt stripped bare by uncertainty. Sarah's eyes slipped away from mine, focusing instead on the unrelenting ceiling tiles as if they held answers. This wasn't the woman who fought daily battles with a smile. This was a woman staring down the barrel of a gun, searching for salvation. "What if it is something serious?" she murmured, her voice catching. I shifted closer to her, wanting to wrap her in a cocoon of strength. "No, don't let your mind take you there. We need to stay grounded. You're not alone in this. Remember that." The nurse nodded before stepping back, leaving us with the weight of her words. As the door closed behind her, a profound silence enveloped us. I reached for Sarah's hand, intertwining my fingers through hers, as if we could forge a lifeline from our shared connection. "You are the strongest person I know," I whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "We just need to stay patient and focused." But patience was a luxury neither of us could afford as our realities danced effortlessly between fear and hope, entwined in the intricate layers of uncertainty. That week felt like a blur, each day stretching into the next as we navigated the pitfall of endless testing and anxious silences. The routine began to morph into a strange hybrid of familiarity laced with anxiety. We would wake, immerse ourselves in the mundane coffee, breakfast, conversation about nothing in particular, only to have the weight of the day plunge us into the depths of our worries come nightfall. On one particularly stifling day, as I sat beside her bed flipping through dog-eared magazines that felt like relics from some forgotten past, Sarah broke the fragile silence. "Sometimes, it feels like I'm almost a ghost," she said, a distant look in her eyes. "I wonder if people see me. I'm scared of fading away, you know?" Her words cut deeper than any physical ailment could. I had seen her spirit dim in ways that neither of us could fathom, and the thought of her feeling invisible stung. "You are not a ghost, Sarah. You are everything to me. If you fade, I fade. We're in this together always," I replied, but it felt inadequate against the enormity of her fear. Days turned to weeks, and still, we waited for answers. Each phone call from the doctor felt like waiting for thunder in the distance, the heavy anticipation growing with every ring. On the rare occasions they contacted us, it was always to schedule more tests or reflect back on vague results we could hardly decipher. Then came the night. I still cannot forget, the air thick with an impending storm, rain lashing against the window as I dozed off in the chair beside her bed. When I awoke, moments later, I found Sarah was still awake, her eyes glossy, reflecting fragments of moonlight. "Can you stay with me for a bit?" she asked softly, and as I maneuvered myself closer, her vulnerability washed over me. I took a deep breath, the heaviness of the day weighing down on us. "I'm here. I'm always here," I whispered, my heart aching with resolve. We talked quietly about anything and everything, our voices weaving together the fabric of shared moments, laughter, and fears. And then, just as the conversation began to lift the shadows hanging over us, her phone buzzed on the bedside table, cutting through our fragile bubble. It was an unfamiliar number. Tension knotted around my chest as she hesitated for a split second before answering. "Hello?" she said, her voice steady yet barely concealing her anxiety. I could see the moment those words hit her and the color drained from her face. Translucent terror reflected back at me as I leaned closer, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. "No, yes, I understand," she stammered before hanging up, shock rooted in her expression, her body still as stone. "What did they say?" Her gaze fell to the floor. "They want me to come in tomorrow for a meeting," she managed to say, words tumbling out heavy and laden. Panic swelled within me. This was at the moment everything could change again. "Did they tell you what the meeting was about?" I pressed, anxiety darting like a wild thing through my bloodstream. She shook her head, but the dread in her eyes was unmistakable. I think we'll find out then." We were standing on the precipice of something startling. Fear draped itself around us like a shroud, thick and suffocating. Tomorrow loomed ahead like an uninvited guest, crushing the remnants of our tentative hope beneath its weight. As we embraced, I felt the fragility of our connection, the unspoken question lingering in the air: would tomorrow unveil hope or torment? Would it shatter us completely or forge an unexpected path toward something greater? The uncertainty tugged at us, a relentless current, edging us closer to the unknown. The next morning crawled into being with an unsettling heaviness that seeped through the thin walls of the hospital. The fluorescent lights above flickered ominously, casting a sterile glow on everything they touched, sharpening the edges of our reality as dread settled in like an unwelcome guest. I spent the night restless on the hospital chair, straining to detect any sign of tranquility on Sarah's face, but all I found was turmoil. "Today," she whispered, her voice hoarse from sleeplessness. I could see her mind was racing, uncertainties entangling her thoughts in a web of fear. "Today could change everything. Or it could be just another step on the road to clarity," I countered, trying to infuse my voice with a confidence I didn't feel. We were both acutely aware that every strand of discourse was laced with a caution born of the unknown. As we waited in a small, sterile consultation room, the clock ticked lazily on the wall, its hands taunting us, elongating each moment into eternity. The anticipation was suffocating, amplified by the damp silence that enveloped us. I glanced at Sarah, her fingers interlocked tightly, knuckles white as they gripped the edges of the chair. She looked so small, so fragile in that moment, like a leaf clinging to a branch in a storm. "Whenever you need, just squeeze my hand," I offered, lifting my own to bridge the gap between us. She did not respond, the weight of the moment grounding her in silence. Finally, the door creaked open, and in walked Dr. Vasquez, her expression betraying none of her thoughts. "Sarah," she greeted, a professional warmth enveloping her words, "thank you for coming in." She didn't immediately meet my gaze, her focus trained solely on Sarah. "Thank you, I guess," Sarah replied, her voice quivering as she sifted through her multitude of emotions: disbelief, fear, and a lingering glint of defiance. "I know you've received some unsettling news, and I want to assure you that we're here to help." Dr. Vasquez's voice was steady, yet the undercurrents of tension flowed through the room like a relentless tide. "Please, just tell me," Sarah urged, urgency dancing in her tone. With a slow breath, Dr. Vasquez handed her a stack of documents, the pages rustling like leaves in a gust of wind. "We've reviewed your latest scans and compiled a detailed analysis. We believe the anomalies might suggest that we want to pursue the possibility of frustration." Twisted in my gut as Sarah's face transformed into a landscape of confusion, fear contorting her features into an agonizing expression. "Just say it." The sharpness in her tone cut through the air, raw and pleading. The doctor sighed, her stern professionalism slipping just a notch. "The tests indicate potential growth of mass," she stated finally, each word sent a tremor through the fragile atmosphere. "But there is a chance we could approach this with a more conservative treatment plan." The room went silent, echoes of hope and despair tentatively weaving through the space between us. I wanted to scream, to lash out at the unimaginable injustice of it all, how life could deal such cruel blows. But I forced myself to hold steady, to be the anchor for both of us. Is it dangerous?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, her vulnerability exposed like an open wound. Doctor Vasquez paused, and I could see the gears in her mind turning as she calculated how best to unveil the heartbreaking truth. "There are risks involved, but early intervention often improves outcomes significantly. Isn't there a chance it's not as catastrophic as it sounds?" I interjected, clinging to the thread of hope that remained. Can we wait and see? Waiting could lead us down a darker path, Dr. Vasquez replied, her eyes shifting to meet mine. It's better we act now. But I must stress that the final decision rests with you, Sarah. Panic swirled in my chest, a chaotic storm threatening to engulf every inch of hope we clung to. How do we even start to process this? I asked, locking eyes with Sarah. What do you want to do? She faltered, her gaze dropping to the floor as a single tear slipped down her cheek, carving a path through the resolve she was struggling to maintain. I don't know. I'm terrified. What if I choose wrong? I instinctively reached out, brushing the tear away with the back of my thumb. We'll face this together, no matter what you decide. And then, desperately, and whatever we decide, we will gather the strength we need. As Dr. Vasquez laid out options, words became a blur, the clarity of the moment lost amidst the barrage of medical jargon and options. The world around us faded into the background, and in that cocoon of chaos, I saw a flicker of something deeper in Sarah's eyes, a spark that had long seemed extinguished beneath layers of fear and uncertainty. I want to fight, she finally stated, gazing up at me with a new determination that caught me off guard. I'm not ready to fade away. The fierce measure in her voice sparked a flame of hope within me, a flicker illuminating the dark corners where despair had dwelt, but just as I was about to respond with a shared sense of courage, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, the sudden intrusion of reality breaking the spell we had woven around ourselves. She hesitated, a mix of fear and curiosity running through her like electricity. Do you want to answer it? I asked gently, but the anxious glint in her eyes was unmistakable. Taking a deep breath, she fished the phone out of her pocket and pressed it to her ear. Hello? She answered, trepidation weaving through the syllables. Her expression shifted rapidly, confusion blurring quickly into stark disbelief. No, that can't be right, she stammered, the change in her features causing my heart to race. You're sure it's today? I leaned forward, heart pounding in anticipation. What new revelation had come crashing through the fragile barricade we'd just started to build? Hold on, what do you mean the results came in? I thought we were meeting to discuss. The line went silent as I watched the color drain from her face. Whatever was being said on the other end of the line was summoning terror from the depths of her soul, ripping away the fragile hope we had just begun to rekindle. Tomorrow? She murmured quietly, face pale and shaking. But I thought I had more time. Etched in that moment was a dark realization that we were teetering on the edge of a precipice, the ground beneath us shifting unexpectedly, ready to yank us into an abyss from which we might not return. We had sought answers, and yet now, it felt as if the unknown was shifting into something far worse than we could ever have anticipated. I reached for her hand, our fingers interlocking in a desperate attempt to defy the uncertainty threatening to engulf us. What did they say, Sarah? The silence that followed was deafening, a barricade of fear shielding her from whatever lay beyond the curtain of reality. The next step, she whispered, voice trembling as that one phrase hung ominously between us like a pendulum swinging back and forth, unceasingly, forbiddingly. As we faced one another, dread coiling in our souls, a chilling realization dawned upon me. This was only the beginning of a journey riddled with darkness and courage, a journey where everything we once understood would shift and transform in ways we could never imagine. The sterile brightness of the hospital seemed to grow dimmer around us as Sarah lowered the phone, her hand trembling ever so slightly as she pulled it away from her ear. A deep well of uncertainty opened up between us, swallowing our courage whole. She looked at me, her eyes glassy and filled with unshed tears that threatened to spill over any moment. What did they say? My voice was firm, underlined with urgency, desperate to bridge the expanding chasm of fear that threatened to break us. They're rushing the testing. They want me back tomorrow for more scans, to look for changes. Her words came out in a rush, but the underlying tremor spoke louder than any of us could express. It was as if the earth had shifted, and we were unmoored, faced with a tide of unknown consequences. More scans? I repeated, feeling like I was gagging on the weight of the word. Hours dulled into an oppressive silence, the remnants of hope splintering under the weight of this new order. Tomorrow loomed above us, a menacing silhouette against our tentative plans. What if she hesitated, the thought trailing off, but I could see the shadows gathering behind her gaze. What if these scans revealed worse news? What if the treatment plans we had begun to formulate collapsed under the new data? I understood her fear intimately, and it gnawed at my insides like a ravenous beast. I felt powerless in the face of her growing despair. "Sarah," I said softly, taking her hand once more, squeezing it gently, anchoring her to the remains of our shared hope. "Whatever they say, we will face it together." "We can," but she shook her head, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "What if it means they found something worse? What if I have to make choices no one should have to face?" A small, tight knot squeezed my heart. The what-ifs loomed like a dark cloud, the specters of our unspoken fears. I could feel the walls closing in again, the overwhelming knowledge that nothing was guaranteed and everything could change in an instant. "We have time," I replied, though I could feel my own certainty waver. "We can still explore all our options. You don't have to," my voice faltered, "you don't have to push yourself to decide anything right now." She bit her lip, the weight of her reality pressing down on her chest. "All I want is to be normal again," she confessed, raw and exposed. "To not have this darkness hovering over me, eating away at my thoughts and dreams." "I want that too," I whispered, unable to hide the tremor that shook my own voice. "But we can take each step together. No rush." I tried to convey strength that I didn't feel. My own foundation felt shaky, with each clinic visit, each new set of results, underscoring the fragility of her condition. Just then, a nurse appeared at the door, her cheerful disposition contrasted starkly against the bleak atmosphere in the room. "Hi there, Sarah. Just checking in on you." Her voice danced into the silence like sunlight filtering through dark clouds. "Oh," Sarah replied, surprise etched on her face as she wiped the tears away hastily, trying to compose herself. "Hi." The nurse, Elizabeth, shrugged off the tension in the air as she walked further into the room. "Dr. Vasquez just wanted to be sure you're okay after that call. Remember, we're here for you. Never hesitate to ask." "Thank you," I murmured, grateful for Elizabeth's bright spirit, a reminder that perhaps, amid the chaos, small sparks of kindness could still break through the haze of despair. "Have you thought about asking for a second opinion?" Elizabeth suggested, her tone earnest yet gentle. "Sometimes it helps to get another perspective on things." Sarah looked at me, her brow furrowing in thought. "Maybe couldn't tea hurt," I agreed, feeling a flicker of hope alight in my chest. "We need to be armed with as much information as possible." The nurse nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. You could also talk to a patient advocate. They can help you navigate the system. We have resources right here in the hospital." There was a sliver of light returning to Sarah's eyes, an ember of determination igniting with newfound possibilities. "I didn't know that was an option." "Here, let me take your phone number, and I can get one of them to reach out to you later today." Elizabeth scribbled it down quickly, her optimism radiating warmth to our cold, clinical surroundings. As the nurse left us, I could feel the air shift, the density lightening just a fraction. It was still heavy, still laced with uncertainty, but now there were threads of hope weaving through the fabric of our circumstances. We had choices, a reminder that we weren't wholly powerless. "Maybe tomorrow won't be so bad after all," Sarah murmured, a tentative smile breaking through. "Exactly," I said, mimicking her smile, even as a part of me battled against doubt. "We've always got each other, no matter what." But what I didn't say was how the phone call and the looming tests had triggered an unsettling anxiety. Amid this semblance of lightness, my mind was racing with its own what-ifs. What could the new scans reveal that we hadn't anticipated? What choices could be pulled from the shadows, those choices that Sarah would need to make? As our conversation settled again into a more natural rhythm, I found myself replaying every word Elizabeth had shared. Perhaps getting a second opinion was a lifeline worth exploring. I resolved to research additional options online when I returned home, hoping to uncover medicine's hidden passages of relief and support. Then, against the backdrop of our tentative rebuilding of hope, something in my gut twisted. I hadn't checked my messages for a while, and the looming dread of unconnected possibilities dulled my senses. As I rifled through my phone, a notification popped up from a number I didn't recognize. Curiosity churned with hesitance as I opened it. It was a picture, a blurry image that had undoubtedly flown into our lives without warning. I squinted at the images that came into focus, my heart beginning to race, tension thrumming in the edges of my vision. It was a scan, an image far too familiar, something that felt dishearteningly out of place. "Sarah," I said, urgency prickling through my fingers, "you need to see this." As I turned the screen towards her, the breath stuck in my throat, a wave of realization crashing down. Something was deeply wrong, possibly beyond our current understanding. What could this mean for us? What choices would now unravel as our fragile resilience was tested once more? Tomorrow was more than just another day, it would thrust us into an upheaval we had not anticipated, opening doors to new paths laden with uncertainty. Together, we stood at the threshold, our hearts pounding in sync, but I realized this battle was far from over. The steady beeping of machines surrounded us, slowly forming a rhythm that contrasted with the storm in my heart. As Sarah took the phone from my shaking hands, her gaze flickered over the scan, brow furrowed in confusion. I watched her mouth form the words but couldn't hear them over the blood rushing in my ears. Every second stretched, forming a heavy silence that weighed us down deeper into our chairs. "What is this?" she finally whispered, the image reflecting uncertainty and fear, the starkness of the digital display a cruel reminder of our reality. "I don't know," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "But it looks like a brain scan." Her eyes widened, tears pooling at the edges like stars ready to fall. "Why would someone send us this?" Anguish ran through her voice, the rising pitch echoing the dread that had taken residence in us both. I think it's a mistake." "It must be, Sarah," I stammered, grasping desperately for clarity, for an escape from this dark turn. Let us go back to Elizabeth. Maybe she can help us figure this out." Yet something in her expression curdled in my chest. A flicker of recognition crossed her features, something far worse than misunderstanding. The pieces of the puzzle began assembling into a troubling picture that cast shadows I dared not explore. But what if it isn't a mistake? The breath caught in my throat. "Let us not jump to conclusions," I urged, hoping my reassurance could fortify whatever flimsy barriers still existed against despair. "What if someone else has seen it? What if there is really something wrong, more than we thought?" The tremor in her voice shattered my feeble armor of hope. My heart sank, my own fears, which I had tried to shield from her, threatened to surface. "Sarah, please," I said, squeezing her hand tightly. "We need to talk to someone. We need answers." She nodded slowly but remained fixated on the screen issuing its ominous message. I couldn't help but feel that the implications of the unknown were already coiling around us, tethering us to anxiety that narrowed our world. "Look," I said, trying to gain control of the moment, "we can't let this distract us from the scans tomorrow. Whatever this is, we will deal with it when we know more. Let us not lose sight of our plans." But she shook her head, her eyes still glued to the phone. "You don't understand. What if this is the change they are looking for?" Her voice broke, the wall breaking down under the weight of despair I had failed to shield her from. Each word slipped out like grains of sand, an avalanche of uncertainty crashing around us. I wanted to hold the universe still for her, to offer her the certainty she needed. Instead, I faltered and felt the ground beneath us shift again. "I'm going to call Elizabeth," I said, my hand reaching for the phone again, but she stopped me. "Wait." Her whisper pierced the atmosphere woven with dread. "I need a moment." I watched, helpless yet instinctively protective, as she shielded her face with trembling fingers. Everything in me wanted to gather her into my arms, to pull her back from this abyss, but I respected her silence, acknowledging the battle she was waging within. The seconds stretched painfully, each heartbeat a reminder of the darkness looming. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quiet but resolute, embers sparking in her eyes. "If tomorrow reveals something, if I have to make choices, I need to know that I'm not alone in it. I need to bring you in, fully." My heart clenched at the thought, and I drew closer to her, swearing silently to hold her hand, even in the depths of despair. "You are never alone, Sarah. I promise we will face whatever comes, together." We remained still for a long moment, the inflatable comfort of resolve washing over us. But then, breaking through the stillness, the phone chimed again, another message lighting the screen. My stomach twisted. I reached for it, the digits blurring under anxious fingers. It was a voicemail, one I hadn't heard. As the playback began, a hollow feeling expanded within me, my apprehension growing. "Hey, Sarah? This is Dr. Vasquez. I'm calling to discuss your results. It's urgent that you get back to us as soon as possible. The generic ringtone shrilled in my mind, punctuating the gravity of his words. The last remnants of whatever fragile calm we had built vanished. Urgent? I echoed, my voice breaking, the weight of the word reverberating against the walls of the room. What does he mean? What does he want? Sarah asked, her body stiffening in fear, eyes locked with mine, and the night came crashing back, filled once again with uncertainties. A helpless knot twisted deeper inside me, the urgency of the doctor's voice casting shadows over our flickering hopes. We sat together at the precipice of unknown choices, navigating a reality we did not choose. The clock on the wall ticked steadily down to tomorrow, the moment of truth looming ever closer. Each second dragged as we faced our fears, the darkness tightening around us, and the flickering little ember of hope dimming yet again. With my heart throbbing in my chest, I realized we were not prepared for the storm that lay ahead. A dark cloud loomed, obscuring all paths forward, threatening to envelope us before we could find our way back to the light. The cold light of dawn broke through the hospital window, catching the edges of a shadow-laden room. I blinked hard, the heaviness in my chest making it hard to shake off the remnants of sleep. Sleep felt like a distant memory, worn thin by distress and the words that played like a broken record in my mind. It's urgent. Turns out, urgency could turn a simple morning into a shattering experience. Sarah lay beside me, her brow creased even in sleep, lost in a world of dreams I yearned to share with her, one free from the specter of our impending reality. I pushed myself upright on the edge of the bed, unsteady, as I glanced at the clock. We were due for the scans soon, and the anticipation roared in me like a tidal wave. I tried to keep my thoughts anchored to the tiny flickers of hope, the care of the medical staff, the seemingly endless studies of treatment options, the rare repeals of no news that indicated an opportunity for health. But the more I forced my mind to the positive, the denser the atmosphere around us felt, wrapping us in a cocoon of dread. I heard the soft murmur of voices outside, nurses already bustling about their day, and it planted the seed of regret in my heart. How could we have ended up here? This wasn't the life we envisioned for ourselves, navigating the twists and turns gifted by fate while clinging desperately to the possibility of a future. The soft sound of sheets shifting drew my attention back to Sarah, who stirred, her eyes fluttering open and settling on me, wide and wary. What time is it? She asked, her voice cracking like dry leaves beneath foot. Time for us to take our next step, I offered, hoping a hint of optimism crept through my solemn grin. Scans in an hour. You think they'll have answers? She questioned, her vulnerability layering the atmosphere with an added depth of longing. I think they'll confirm what we talked about, I replied, willing the truth to land gently on her heart. We'll walk out of here, together. But before she could respond, a soft knock sounded at the door, and moments later, a nurse entered, her cheerful demeanor a peculiar contrast to the weight pressing in the room. Good morning, you two. Ready for your scans? Ready as we'll ever be, I replied, casting a glance at Sarah, who mirrored my sense of resolve but seemed unable to display the same buoyancy. First, we just need to go over your history, Sarah, the nurse said, flipping through her clipboard. Are there any changes you'd like to note since your last visit? Her words sent a tremor through Sarah, and I squeezed her hand under the sheets. You're not alone in this, I reminded softly, wishing to instill some semblance of courage. As they talked, I became vaguely aware of the bustling world outside, a family visiting their loved one, laughter echoing through the sterile hallways. It startled me. Even in a place like this, where sorrow hung like an ominous cloud, life continued unabated. Are you okay? Sarah's voice brought me back to our small cocoon, and I nodded, even as unanswered questions filled the cracks of my composure. The nurse finished her questions, her smile unwavering as she prepared to lead us to the scanning room. But as she stepped back, a fleeting expression of concern crossed her face, brief but impactful, and my chest tightened with unease. Okay, let us get you both moving. Right this way. I stood, helping Sarah to her feet, her body stiff as though every muscle held the weight of her anxiety. I could sense the storm brewing in her heart, and I wished I could carry that burden entirely. As we navigated the maze of hallways toward the inspection room, a strange thought struck me. What if the results didn't reveal anything? What if all this fear was for nothing? I hadn't allowed myself to consider that possibility, clutching tightly to the fear that had become our harsh companion. We reached the scanning room and I held Sarah close, whispering reassurances that both of us needed to hear. But as she slipped onto the scanning bed, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. Would the scans yield clarity or shatter us further? As the technician prepared the machinery, I stayed by Sarah's side, brushing my fingers through her hair, trying to uphold the fragments of strength I still felt flickering in our bond. Whatever happens, I said, I'm right here. Together. She nodded, but a glimmer of something else danced in her eyes, a peculiar brightness, shadowing the worry that was all too familiar. My chest tightened as my instincts screamed of change. The beeping machinery began its monotone chants, quiet and ghostly, cutting through the silence. In that moment, the door swung open again, bringing in an unexpected figure. Dr. Vasquez, the technician called, her voice laced with confusion. Is there a change in the scans? I was told to come in, he said, glancing at Sarah, eyes scanning her like she was an equation he desperately needed to solve. My heart plummeted into an abyss. I glanced at Sarah, her expression shifting to one of concern, mirroring the unease coursing through me. What did this mean? Was it more than just a call for routine assessments, and then the call for clarity turned into a question that hung perilously in the air, echoing against every wall? What if the results bring an even more complicated truth? In that moment, just as I feared, doubt seized me. Could we unearth light among the shadows, or were we standing on the edge of discovery? Our world reshaped once more, leaving us gasping in its wake for what might come crashing down next. The sun hung low in the sky as I stepped out of the hospital, my breath shallow and jagged. The weight of the last few weeks pressed heavily against my chest. Just moments earlier, we had received news that shattered everything. We had begun to rebuild the very fabric of what Sarah and I thought we knew about her health. I had felt as if I were holding a glass of water balanced on my head, knowing that any sudden movement could send it flying, splintering it into 1,000 shards of fear and uncertainty. But amid the chaotic tumult raging inside, there was a quiet resolve within Sarah that I would not ignore. The scans had revealed something, an isolated mass, potentially benign, but a mass nonetheless. We'll need to address this immediately, Dr. Vasquez had said, his voice steady yet underscored with urgency. A biopsy is the next step. Terrifying words that swung like a pendulum over our lives, threatening to tip us back into chaos. As I walked to the car, the sun painted the pavement in swaths of golden light that felt mocking against the backdrop of my heavy heart. I had never felt so distant from the reality of sunlight and laughter that surrounded me. It was as if the world kept moving, but I was caught in a layer of murky water, the surface unreachable. I sat in the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. My thoughts raced, trapped in a spiral of what-ifs. What if it wasn't benign? What if we were facing something insidious, something that seeped beyond medical textbooks, beyond us? But then I remembered Sarah's eyes, those flickers of defiance that had sparked when she said she wanted to fight. It was that very instinct that had helped us cling to hope amidst despair. I pulled out my phone, staring at it, vulnerable to the question that nagged at my heart. How could I support her when I felt so helpless myself? I scrolled through our conversations, filled with dreams we had planned for our future. That which we shared had momentarily slipped to the periphery, clouded by crises we had never anticipated. As I finally turned the key in the ignition and the engine roared to life, I made a promise to myself to remind Sarah of her strength, to remind her that we're better together. I couldn't let the fear consume us. When I returned to her room, the air felt electrically charged. The curtains were drawn, and she was sitting up, her delicate fingers fidgeting with the quilt that covered her legs. My heart sank at the sight. She looked so lost, so small beneath the weight of her thoughts. You came back, she said, a flicker of vulnerability softening her voice. Of course, I did. I told you I wouldn't leave you, I replied, keenly aware of every subtle shift in her eyes. I moved closer and took her hands in mine, the warmth reassuring. In that moment, the air shifted between us, filled with unsaid fears and unyielding resolve. I don't want to keep doing this, she confessed, her voice breaking, eyes shimmering. I don't want to be stuck in this waiting game, always looking over my shoulder for the next hurdle. My heart ached for her. It had been unbearable to watch her carry the weight of worry like a heavy cloak across her shoulders. Neither do I said firmly, squeezing her hands. But we will get through this together. We will confront every challenge. I'm committed to every step of the journey with you. I watched her absorb my words, the resolve beginning to return to her features. What if this biopsy reveals something we can't handle? She whispered, pain threading through her voice. Then we handle it together. We'll reach out for every bit of support. We'll gather every shred of information we can. We will not let fear dictate our choices, I affirmed, my voice rich with conviction. A thin smile fluttered across her lips, and I felt an ember of hope pulse between us. What if it doesn't? She asked, her eyes shining with reluctant longing. Then we rise from it together, no matter the outcome. You do not have to face this alone, you never will. I brushed my thumb across her hand, wanting to convey my next words perfectly. This is not just your fight, Sarah. It's ours. She drew a shuddering breath, allowing the weight of our potential future to intertwine with our present. Just then, a gentle knock interrupted our moment. It was Dr. Vasquez. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, a trace of warmth in his otherwise composed demeanor. I wanted to check on you both before we move forward. No, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. I want to know what's next. Dr. Vasquez nodded, a hint of respect flickering across his features. That's the spirit. We'll be scheduling the biopsy as soon as possible. I understand this is anxiety-inducing, but remember that we're here with you every step of the way. So, what exactly does this mean? I asked, urgency pressing through my words. What are our options? We'll proceed with the biopsy to gather more information about the mass. Once we analyze that, we'll have a clearer understanding of what we're dealing with. If it's benign, we can set a manageable plan. If not, he met my gaze directly, shifting the gravity of the moment. Then we'll address it with the care it deserves. In either scenario, you both have resources available to you here. As Dr. Vasquez spoke, I could feel Sarah leaning into the conversation, her posture lifting slightly, her features softening ever so slightly. The world didn't burst into wild color, but hope had found a foothold in that moment, a brick upon which we could build something solid. Okay, Sarah said at last, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Let us do it. I want to know. Good, Dr. Vasquez replied, nodding with approval. The courage you're showing will carry you a long way. I'll be in touch soon regarding the scheduling. When he left, I turned to Sarah, her spirit rekindled, tension easing in her shoulders. You've got this, I whispered, brushing a strand of hair back from her forehead. We've got this. Together, she affirmed, her smile lighting up the remnants of darkness around us. As the hours unfolded, we prepared for what was to come, a newfound determination growing. The biopsy would soon reveal answers and could give us the clarity we had been seeking. While the uncertainties still loomed, we now had a plan, and that plan birthed a sense of empowerment within us both. As I took her hand in mine, I felt the distinct mixing of fear and hope, a reminder that, even amid trials, we could craft a path forward. The sun was setting behind the horizon, casting a warm glow that poured through the window, illuminating our small sanctuary. In that moment, I realized something profound. We would not just endure this together, we would thrive, and as the last remnants of light faded into the soft embrace of night, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that whatever the future held, we would face it side by side. The world breathed around us, each heartbeat sinking to the cadence of our resolve, a shared resolve radiating life and love. I squeezed her hand tighter. Together, we rise, I whispered, each word resonating deeply within our hearts. And then, from the depths of our journey, a single thought burst forth, clear and unwavering: no matter the storms ahead, we had one another, and that was enough.